The latest episode of Yellowjackets follows up on the events of the last with what happened after Ben's trial, and alongside that, the ladies also deal with the aftermath of what happened with Lottie. So, again, to recap, once Ben gets sentenced as guilty, so comes the question of what to do with him. And for the ladies in the past, the issue is, while of course people like Shauna's like death penalties make the most sense, the question becomes who's going to issue it. And even though Shauna's been so gung-ho on Ben being punished, she isn't trying to take up a gun to kill him. So with the way things work within the group, they decide to draw cards, and Saeason ends up being the one who draws a card, the King of Hearts, I believe, and she is tasked with killing Ben. And the problem for her is that she naturally can't do it, so Van tries to trigger her dark side, and she even uses the idea of Stefan versus Steve Urkel in terms of tapping into that dark side. And of course, Saeason doesn't really take well to be considered Steve Urkel compared to Stefan with the dark side, but they try. Van tries to turn on her Stefan through sex. She tries to do a few other things, but ultimately what does it is just having a gun in hand and it being a moment where she needs to switch rather than trying to control that entity. But sticking with the past before we go to the present, while Saeason is trying to get herself mentally prepared, Lottie, Travis, and Akilah go back to the cave where they found Ben, and they try to have Akilah have another vision, and she does. She almost dies in the process, but what she sees is Ben becoming a bridge to civilization. So with that vision, Lottie, Akilah, and Travis save Ben in the last moment before Dog Saeason kills him. And now the question becomes, how is this man with one leg is supposed to not only save them, but how are they going to keep him from running away or trying to escape? And the answer to that is Shauna influences Melissa to seemingly cut a tendon in the remaining leg that Ben has so that he can't go anywhere. Now, getting to the present, Misty's the one who reveals to Saeason, Van, and Shauna that Lottie died, and only Van seems notably affected. For Saeason, in her defense, she has so much going on that has nothing to do with Lottie. She finally gets to see Sammy, but he seems to be distant from her. She also sees Simone, who has an awkward moment with Van, and it's very much clear that Saeason's storyline is still going to be in a bit of a stagnant place with Van hopping on for the ride. But while they're having no struggles, Misty decides to start investigating since, of course, people wanted to throw out accusations that she might have been involved with Lottie's death. So not only to clear her name but get answers, she does her investigation. Shauna, who has nothing better to do, decides she's also going to try to investigate Misty because she, in her mind, needs someone to blame for all this. Because as much as Shauna knows that her life isn't where it's supposed to be, it seems her desire to really hold herself accountable is not that high. So instead of, just accepting her part in Lottie's death because she kicked her out after she flipped out, instead she decides, I'm going to prove Misty did it. I'm going to prove that I'm innocent. I'm not a bad person, yada, yada, yada. And all that happens is Walter ends up stalking her. Those two have a little bit of a clash. And then it becomes a case of Shauna and Walter working together while Misty works on her own, and all paths converge at Lottie's father's house. Well, penthouse. There, everyone seems to be looking for Lottie's cell phone in order to get some type of information, and unfortunately for Misty, Walter is a tech whiz, so he's able to not only find the phone but wipe it out, and he's trying to push her into becoming friends or something again, but just him working with Shauna already kind of messes things up, and he's sort of at this point where he doesn't know what to do. He was under the impression that Misty likes the challenge, and maybe he thought because of how Shauna and the rest treat Misty, maybe he could push some boundaries as well, so he has a little bit more leniency when it comes to the relationship, but from what it seems, that's not the case. And with that, Misty goes to the basement of the hotel where she died, Lottie being she, and collects some of the evidence that she might have pulled something from the wall. She also went to the morgue before she went to Mr. Matthews' house to go and pick from Lottie's nails. I mean, she's doing a pretty thorough investigation, and the reason why she needs to is because while Misty and Walter might be doing a whole thing on their own as citizen detectives, Mr. Matthews trying to get this case closed as soon as possible. It isn't 100% clear why he wants this case not to blow up, but he is making sure the police rule it as an accident rather than a homicide or maybe a suicide or anything that could really draw attention to his daughter or draw attention to him. Now, assumingly it could be because even though he has never been fond of Lottie's eccentricities, it's still his daughter, so he doesn't want it put out there that she used to be part of a cult, maybe have the Yellowjackets thing get brought up, or anything that could really tarnish his daughter's legacy or name, especially in connection to him. But perhaps another reason is because Mr. Matthews is slowly starting to lose it, and it could be that he knows and he's kind of sensitive about it, so he doesn't want to be taken advantage of as he continues to progress or digress. But in a kind of surprising moment, while Misty and Walter are kind of combating each other in order to get the most evidence and solve the case, Shauna finds herself wandering into Lottie's room, and Mr. Matthews mistakes Shauna for Lottie, and they have a conversation which I don't say gives either one a sense of closure, but at the same time it does present a nice moment for a man who is starting to maybe deal with the fact that his daughter died in a way that he may never truly get to reconcile with. And through this conversation, Shauna gives him something that I don't think anybody else can give. And maybe in a way, she gets that moment that Jeff has been trying to look for, where she can remind herself that she is a good person. For a few predictions, I think part of the reason why Ben is shown as the way home is not going to be because he discovers something and is able to fix a beacon or whatever, but I think the wind is going to come. It's going to probably be brutal again, and he ends up being the way home because they eat him in order to potentially survive the final days before they are actually rescued. Another prediction for us is that Akila is probably going to keep going back to that cave to have visions for answers, since people need that at this time, and eventually that's going to end up killing her so that she doesn't end up coming to the future, or else being alive in the future rather. Which leads to the last prediction, and that's when it comes to Melissa. I think that with Shauna, she has some ability to regulate her darkness, but with Melissa, I think that she awakened Melissa's darkness, and with that, Melissa never found a way to turn it off or adjust it. So when it comes to her eventually popping up in the present, she's going to, and she being Shauna, she's going to deal with the monster that she created, and maybe that's kind of the heart of her guilt, that she created or made Melissa this way, and then she abandoned her rather than joined her or even tried to help her kind of regulate as Shauna learned to. So getting to the review section, for us, Shauna's scene with Mr. Matthews was probably the best, and it just continues to show that when we're talking about past Shauna or present Shauna, she's the only character when combined actually is complete in a way that doesn't give one side the edge over the other. Shauna in the past, brutal, definitely callous in many ways, is starting to taint Melissa, and it's wonderful to watch in an entertainment way. And then to see Shauna as an adult, even though she's a little bit more hokey in comedy because of how she interacts with Misty, how she interacts with Walter, at the same time, then she has these moments with Mr. Matthews where she sees that he's an old man that is perhaps dealing with regrets, who's probably not fully understanding what happened to his daughter, and maybe doesn't want to know just because of the pain involved. And her just pretending to be that person for him, to be his daughter so he can have some type of, in his mind, reconciliation or conclusion to a relationship that is a little bit more on his terms than just something that he was forced to reckon with, creates a very sweet moment that kind of reminds you that when it comes to Shauna, it's not all about that picture perfect family that she can really tap into and try to live up to. She could actually be a good, normal person. It's just she has pulls in her life and pulls in her mind that make it so that she finds herself drawn to certain things that can cause issues, which include death. Which leads to another thing that kind of deals with Shauna as a highlight, and that's just the patterns. In my mind, Shauna is very much capable of being a leader, but I think a part of her also likes kind of being like the sidekick or being a partner. And I would say, when you compare what's going on with her and Melissa in the past to her and Walter just in this episode, I think you kind of see her gravitate to what she's used to. When it comes to Shauna, I think one of the appeals for her when it came to Jackie was the assumption of power, knowing something she didn't know, experiences she didn't have. And with Walter, even though he's basically the male version of Misty, except with some technology and more money, I think this an allure of him being able to handle a situation. There was an allure of him having this tech knowledge, and though he's a weird ass dude, it even helps you kind of understand what made Shauna perhaps interested in Jeff at one time. There's something about, I think, someone being able to handle a situation for Shauna, someone who has assumed power. I'm not saying it's something that, like, gets her off, but I think it's something that she is inherently attracted to the point where it continues to make you wonder and want to see. Hopefully this show makes the 5 seasons it wants to be, that hopefully in season 4 or even in season 5 we get to see more of what the Yellowjackets as teens dealt with in their home lives, so that we can get the full picture. Never mind the connection between what life was like for them in the 90s up to, I would think, the show is in 2021 in modern times. But either way, it's lovely to see these patterns and to see them grow and get more complicated. And even though mainly in Shauna was seeing that, there is a hope that eventually it spreads to others. Which leads to the last highlight, and that's Akilah and Melissa. And that's just because, while I'm predicting that Akila's going to probably end up dead, at the very least, I feel like they're building her up so her death matters, and it's not just something that feels random like Lottie's death, or something that's, just fodder because, having someone die is supposed to be a major thing. And then with Melissa, while it's still not clear who Hilary Swank is supposed to play, since we're about halfway through the season and she still hasn't shown up, there is a hope that she's Melissa just because of what she can bring to the situation. And because Melissa, you saw originally, was this seemingly innocent girl that just felt taken by the influence and power that Shauna has. Again, it's about relationships and patterns here. So it'd be interesting to see Melissa go from someone who liked Shauna because of the power influence. Then they came back to normal world. She tried to get back with Jeff. And then you see Melissa kind of shift things as she saw Shauna become more demure, more mindful, and really just tried to find herself more, trying to get to that normalcy again. And then Melissa's out here fully changed by how Shauna influenced her and how much they did together, just struggle with trying to get to that normalcy again, to the point of potentially rejecting it. And just that build makes it feel like they're using that Shauna blueprint and actually using it for someone, in this case Melissa, and I'm hoping that it pays off in the long run. There's never a guarantee it's going to do that, because for a lot of the characters they still feel very lopsided. Like Van and Thais are still a way more interesting characters in the past and present, and I don't think that may ever change at this point. But at least with these new ones they're building up, there is always a chance that if they do pop up in the present day, there is something worth watching.